What happens when a powerful man believes he can silence a stranger with a single act of violence? In a quiet American town, a deputy's arrogance sparked a fire he couldn't control, a fire led by a woman he never expected to face. This is a story of courage, truth, and a community that refused to stay silent. By the end, you'll wonder, could this happen where you live? Stick with us, drop a comment with your city, and let's uncover a tale that will leave you inspired and ready to fight for justice. In the rolling hills of upstate New York, the town of Fairhaven was a snapshot of small-town America. Tree-lined streets, a diner serving pancakes since the 1970s, and a weathered courthouse that stood as a symbol of order. The air carried the scent of pine and apple cider, and the town square buzzed with the chatter of locals on crisp October mornings. But beneath this quaint facade, Fairhaven harbored a darker truth, guarded by men who wore badges like armor and wielded power as a weapon. At the heart of that power was Sheriff's Deputy Caleb Holt, a name whispered with fear or reverence, depending on who you asked. Holt, at 45, was a commanding presence, broad-shouldered, with a buzz-cut blonde head and pale blue eyes that judged every soul he met. His smirk was a signature, a silent declaration of dominance, and his uniform was always pristine, as if to remind Fairhaven who ruled. For nearly 2 decades, he'd shaped the town through intimidation, arrests without cause, threats whispered in back alleys, and a network of loyal deputies who turned a blind eye. The community, a mix of old families and new arrivals, lived in an uneasy truce with Holt. Some saw him as a protector against outsiders. Others knew him as a tyrant who thrived on fear. But no one dared challenge him, until now. On a chilly October morning, Clara Bennett stepped off a Greyhound bus, her leather satchel heavy with case files and memories. At 58, Clara carried the weight of a life defined by confrontation. First as a military police officer in the deserts of Iraq, where she'd faced hostile insurgents, then as a federal investigator with the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, where she'd taken down corrupt officials from New Orleans to Detroit. Her dark skin was etched with faint lines from years of service, her graying curls tucked under a wool cap, and her eyes, sharp, unyielding, scanned the town square with the precision of a seasoned soldier. Officially, she was a consultant hired by the mayor to review the sheriff's department after a flood of complaints about excessive force. Unofficially, she was a federal oversight agent, dispatched to expose a department that had dodged accountability for decades. Clara's journey to Fairhaven wasn't just professional, it was personal. 20 years ago, her younger brother, Jamal, a 22-year-old college student, had been killed by police in Chicago during a routine traffic stop. The official report called it justified. The family called it a cover-up. Clara had fought for answers then, but the system had stonewalled her. That loss had fueled her career, turning her into a relentless force against injustice. Now, in Fairhaven, she saw echoes of that pain, complaints of brutality, silenced voices, a sheriff's department that operated like a private fiefdom. As she crossed the square, her boots crunching on fallen leaves, Clara felt the weight of curious stares. A grizzled farmer nodded politely, a group of teenagers whispered behind their phones, and an elderly woman clutched her purse tighter, as if Clara's presence threatened the town's fragile peace. She was an outsider, and in Fairhaven, outsiders were met with suspicion. Adjusting her coat, she climbed the courthouse steps, her mind mapping the day ahead. Today was a preliminary hearing for Marcus Reed, a 27-year-old community organizer arrested during a peaceful protest against a proposed fracking pipeline that threatened the town's water supply. Holt's report claimed Marcus had incited violence, throwing bottles at deputies. Witness accounts and a grainy phone video suggested otherwise. A peaceful march met with batons and arrests. The courtroom was a pressure cooker. Wooden benches groaned under the weight of onlookers, families clutching photos of loved ones, activists with signs reading, "Justice for Marcus," and deputies in crisp uniforms standing like sentinels. Clara slipped into a back row, her notepad tucked discreetly in her lap. She spotted Holt immediately, near the prosecution table, arms crossed, his smirk a silent challenge. Judge Eleanor Grayson entered, a silver-haired woman in her late 60s, known for her fairness but constrained by Fairhaven's old guard. Clara wondered if that fairness would hold against a man like Holt. The hearing began. Marcus sat at the defense table, his hands clasped tightly, his brown eyes a mix of defiance and fear. His dreadlocks were tied back, and his worn jacket spoke of long nights organizing protests. Holt took the stand, his voice steady as he painted Marcus as a dangerous agitator who'd attacked deputies during the march. His story was polished, rehearsed, but Clara noted inconsistencies. The video showed no bottles, and witness statements contradicted Holt's timeline. Marcus's attorney, Sarah Nguyen, a young public defender with a quiet intensity, cross-examined Holt. Why was his body camera off? Why did no other deputy corroborate the bottle-throwing claim? Holt's answers were evasive, his tone dismissive. In Fairhaven, his word was law, and he knew it. Clara scribbled notes, her face unreadable. She wasn't here to intervene, not yet. Her job was to observe, to gather evidence that could withstand the pushback from Holt and his allies. But as the hearing recessed and the crowd spilled into the hallway, fate intervened. Clara stood near a vending machine, reviewing her notes, when Holt's voice cut through the chatter. "Writing a book, lady." She looked up. He was inches away, his smirk sharp as a blade, his breath carrying a hint of tobacco. "Just taking notes," Clara said, her tone even. Holt leaned closer, his voice low and menacing. "I saw you in there, watching me. You one of those activist types, here to stir up trouble?" "I'm an observer," Clara replied, her voice steady. "Observer?" Holt scoffed, his voice rising to draw attention. "You people always got an agenda. You think you can waltz into my town and tell me how to do my job?" Clara held his gaze. "Deputy Holt, I suggest you step back." He laughed, a short, ugly sound that echoed off the walls. Then, without warning, he grabbed her wrist, twisting it hard enough to make her wince. He shoved her against the wall, the impact reverberating through the hallway. Gasps erupted from bystanders. A young woman shouted, "Stop!" A man with a camera phone froze, recording, but Holt's eyes were locked on Clara's, his face inches from hers. "You don't belong here," he hissed. "Get that through your head." Clara didn't flinch. Her voice was calm, almost serene. "You just made a very big mistake." Before Holt could react, Judge Grayson's voice boomed from the doorway. "Deputy Holt, what in God's name are you doing?" Holt froze, his grip loosening. Clara stepped away, adjusting her sleeve as if nothing had happened. "I said, what are you doing?" Grayson repeated, her face a storm of anger. Holt muttered, "She was causing a disturbance." "Enough," Grayson snapped. "Get back to the courtroom, now." Holt hesitated, his jaw tight, then stormed off, his boots pounding the floor like a drumbeat of defeat. The hallway fell silent, all eyes on Clara. She picked up her notepad, offered Grayson a small nod and said, "I'm fine." But inside, she knew this wasn't just a moment of bravado. It was the spark that would ignite a revolution Holt had no idea he'd unleashed. What he didn't know, what no one in Fairhaven knew, was that by laying hands on Clara Bennett, he hadn't just assaulted a civilian. He'd challenged a woman who'd spent her life dismantling men like him, a woman whose brother's death had forged her into a warrior for justice, and she was ready to turn Fairhaven upside down. The hallway cleared slowly, whispers trailing like smoke. Clara's wrist throbbed, a dull ache beneath her sleeve, but her resolve was unshaken. She'd faced worse, interrogations under fire in Baghdad, death threats from crooked sheriffs in the Deep South. But this felt personal, not because of the bruise, but because Holt's arrogance mirrored the system that had failed her brother. She stepped outside, the autumn air biting her skin. The courthouse lawn was alive with motion, protesters chanting, "Free Marcus," with handmade signs, locals watching from porches, and a young man filming with his phone. He approached cautiously, his brown eyes wide with urgency. "Ma'am, I got it all on video. What happened in there? I can send it to you." Clara studied him, lanky, in a hoodie, with a nervous energy that reminded her of her nephew back in Chicago. "What's your name?" "Jaden Carter," he said. "Marcus's cousin." "Don't send it to me," Clara said. "Save it. Back it up. Cloud storage, a USB drive, somewhere safe. Share the password with one person you trust." He frowned, confused. "Why not release it now?" "Timing is everything," Clara said. "We need the right moment to strike. Trust me." Jaden nodded, clutching his phone like a lifeline. "Okay, I'll do it." Clara watched him hurry back to the crowd, her mind already calculating. The video was a weapon, but a premature strike could let Holt and his allies spin the narrative, claim provocation, or bury it in legal delays. She tapped her earpiece, connecting to Director Hayes at the DOJ. "We've got an incident," she said softly. "You okay, Clara?" Hayes' voice crackled. "I'm fine. Holt just escalated things. We need to move faster." "Understood. You've got full authority. Keep me posted." Clara hung up, her eyes scanning the lawn. She spotted Holt across the way, talking to two deputies, his gestures sharp and angry. He hadn't seen Jaden filming, hadn't realized the trap was set. By noon, Fairhaven was a hive of rumors. The hallway incident spread like wildfire, fueled by whispers and text messages. Local activists gathered in coffee shops, sharing the news in hushed tones, while a retired teacher posted a detailed account on a community blog, urging people to come forward. At the sheriff's department, Holt stormed into the briefing room, slamming the door behind him. A dozen deputies watched in uneasy silence, some loyal, some wavering. "She's trouble," Holt growled. "Here to take us down." Sergeant Tom Kessler, a grizzled veteran and Holt's closest ally, leaned back in his chair. "You grabbed her in front of witnesses, Caleb. That's a problem." "She was baiting me," Holt snapped. "You saw how she looked at me." Kessler shook his head. "Doesn't matter. People were filming. If that video gets out, it won't," Holt said, but his voice lacked conviction. In the corner, Deputy Lena Torres, a 5-year veteran with sharp instincts, felt a pang of guilt. She'd joined the department hoping to serve her community, but over the years, she'd seen Holt's abuses. False arrests, threats, reports altered to protect his allies. She'd stayed silent to keep her job, to provide for her young daughter. But the video of Holt assaulting Clara had shaken her. She exchanged a glance with Deputy Malik Johnson, a quiet man in his early 30s, who shared her unease. They said nothing, but their silence spoke volumes. Holt's grip on the department was slipping, and they could feel it. That afternoon, Holt met with his union representative, Victor Crane, a slick attorney who'd built a career defending cops in misconduct cases. They sat in a corner booth at the town's only cafe, the smell of burnt coffee filling the air. "We can contain this," Crane said, sipping his espresso. "But you need to stay quiet. No outbursts, no social media, nothing." Holt's jaw tightened. "She's lying about me. She's probably some Fed." Crane raised an eyebrow. "A Fed? You sure?" "I can smell it," Holt said. "Too calm, too calculated." "If she's federal, you've got bigger problems than a video," Crane warned. "The DOJ's been circling small-town departments like ours for years. Civil rights violations, excessive force. They don't mess around." Holt's face darkened. "Then we find out who she is. Dig up something. Anything." Crane hesitated. "That's a risky move, Caleb." I don't pay you to tell me what's risky, Holt snapped. I pay you to fix this. That evening, Clara met Mayor Olivia Reed in a private room at the town library, a historic building with shelves sagging under decades of books. Olivia, a third-generation Fairhaven resident in her 50s, with auburn hair and a weary smile, had campaigned on reform, but struggled against the sheriff's department's entrenched power. I heard what happened, she said, closing the door behind her. Are you pressing charges? Not yet, Clara replied. Charges are a tactic, not a strategy. We need to expose the whole system, not just Holt. Olivia nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of a table. Judge Grayson called me. She's furious. Says Holt's behavior was indefensible. Good, Clara said. We'll need her. For what? A public disciplinary hearing. Transparent, on record, with Grayson presiding. Olivia's eyes widened. That'll tear this town apart. It's already torn, Clara said, her voice firm. You've just been pretending it's not. The pipeline protests, the arrests, the silence, it's all connected. Olivia sighed, rubbing her temples. Half the town sees Holt as a hero. The other half's too scared to speak. My own council's divided. Some want reform. Others want to protect the status quo. Then we give them a reason to choose, Clara said. I've got witness statements, Jaden's video, and a paper trail of complaints going back years. Beatings, false arrests, threats. Holt's not just one bad apple. He's the root of a rotten tree. Olivia looked at her for a long moment, her expression softening. You're not what I expected from a consultant. Clara smiled faintly. Most people don't expect me. I've spent my life proving them wrong. As they finalized their plan, Holt sat across town in an unmarked SUV, watching the library through binoculars. He didn't know Clara's name yet, but he knew she was meeting the mayor. His blood boiled with a mix of rage and fear. Whoever she wasn't going to ruin him, not in his town. He gripped the steering wheel, his mind racing with plans, digging into her past, rallying his allies, silencing the whispers before they grew louder. The next morning, Fairhaven woke to chaos. Jaden's video hadn't just leaked, it exploded. A bystander, not Jaden himself, had uploaded it to a national news outlet overnight. By 9 a.m., the story dominated headlines. CNN aired a live segment from the courthouse lawn, local radio stations interrupted their broadcasts, and community blogs buzzed with eyewitness accounts. The footage was raw and unfiltered. Holt grabbing Clara, twisting her wrist, shoving her against the wall, his face twisted with rage. The caption screamed, "Small-town deputy caught on camera assaulting woman in courthouse. Who's protecting who?" Across the country, activists shared the clip, while families in Fairhaven gathered in living rooms, their televisions glowing with the unfolding drama. The town, once a forgotten dot on the map, was now thrust into the national spotlight, its quiet streets echoing with the weight of scrutiny. Clara watched the coverage from her motel room, her coffee growing cold on the nightstand. She hadn't wanted the video out yet, preferring a controlled release. But truth had its own momentum. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Reporters seeking quotes, activists offering support, even a DOJ colleague checking in. One call stood out. Judge Grayson. "You didn't leak it," Grayson said, her voice steady but curious. "No," Clara replied. "But I'm not sorry it's out." "Neither am I," Grayson said. "I'm convening a disciplinary hearing for Holt. 5 days from now. You ready for the storm?" Clara's lips curved slightly. "I was born in a storm." At the sheriff's department, Holt was unraveling. He paced the briefing room, shouting at Kessler and Crane. "Find out who leaked it. I want names, addresses, everything." His allies were fraying. Kessler looked uneasy, his loyalty tested. Crane was already drafting a press release to distance the union from Holt's actions. Deputy Lena Torres, who'd watched the video with a sinking feeling, felt her conscience stir. She'd stayed silent for years, but seeing Holt's violence in stark clarity, combined with the growing public outrage, pushed her to act. She contacted Marcus's lawyer that afternoon, offering to testify about Holt's history of misconduct. "I've got records," she said. Dates, names, cases he buried. By evening, Clara had a new ally inside the department, a crack in Holt's armor. But Holt wasn't idle. He sent 2 off-duty deputies to Jaden Carter's apartment, claiming a noise complaint as a pretext. Jaden's mother, a nurse who worked double shifts to support her family, answered the door. "We're just checking on your son," one deputy said, his smile too tight. "He's not here," she said, her voice firm. "Unless you've got a warrant, you need to leave." Clara had anticipated this. She'd warned Jaden to stay with a friend and alerted Judge Grayson. By morning, Grayson issued a protective order for Jaden and his family, citing harassment by the department. Holt's rage boiled over. "She's got the judge in her pocket now," he shouted at Kessler. "It's not just the judge," Kessler said, his voice low. "The DOJ's sniffing around. You need to cool it, Caleb." But Holt didn't cool. He launched a smear campaign, using anonymous social media accounts to post lies. Clara was a radical activist with a personal vendetta. Marcus was a gang member with a hidden criminal record. Jaden's video was doctored by out-of-town agitators. The lies spread through local Facebook groups and a sympathetic radio host, but they didn't stick. Fairhaven's community began to push back. Pastor Naomi Wells, a fiery preacher who'd spent years advocating for the town's youth, held prayer vigils outside the courthouse, her voice ringing with calls for justice. Her involvement wasn't just spiritual. She'd seen Holt's abuses firsthand when one of her parishioners, a teenage boy, was beaten by deputies for missing curfew. Naomi had reported it, but Holt had buried the case. Now, she rallied her congregation, turning her church into a safe haven for witnesses. Teachers shared stories of students harassed by deputies. Retired Deputy Bill Harlan, a man who'd served 30 years before retiring in disgust, stepped forward with his own tale of Holt, coercing him into falsifying a report a decade ago. "I was part of the silence," Harlan said at a community meeting. "I'm here to break it." The days before the hearing were a whirlwind. Clara worked tirelessly, meeting with witnesses in coffee shops and church basements, reviewing evidence in her motel room, coordinating with the DOJ over encrypted calls. She met Marcus, Jaden, and Naomi at a community center, a converted warehouse, where the walls were covered with protest art. "We're with you," Naomi said, her voice resonant. "This isn't just about Holt. It's about every family he's hurt, every voice he's silenced. My church has buried too many kids because of him." Marcus nodded, his hand steady now. "I'm testifying. For my mom, for my friends, who didn't make it out of jail." Jaden clutched his phone. "Me too. For Marcus. For everyone." Clara looked at them, her heart swelling with pride. "You're not just witnesses," she said. "You're the future of this town." Holt, meanwhile, planned his counterattack. He met with Ray Voss, a shady private investigator with a reputation for digging up dirt or fabricating it. "Find something on her," Holt ordered, sliding an envelope across the table. Voss returned 2 days later, shaking his head. "Her record's clean. Military service, federal work, not even a parking ticket. But I found something personal. Her brother died in a police shooting 20 years ago in Chicago. Ruled justified, but the family claimed it was a cover-up. No public statements from her, though." Holt's eyes gleamed. "That's it. We paint her as a vendetta-driven crusader out to settle a score. It's thin," Voss warned. "She's got no paper trail on it." "Then we make one," Holt said, his voice cold. The night before the hearing, Holt made one final move. He tracked Clara to her motel, waiting until she stepped outside to grab a coffee from the diner across the street. He approached her in the parking lot, his voice low and menacing. "You think you're untouchable?" he hissed. "I've got friends in high places. You'll regret this." Clara didn't flinch. "You're running out of moves, Holt," she said calmly, "and I've only just started." She walked away, her heart steady, knowing his threats were a sign of desperation. The smear hit the next morning. Anonymous posts claimed Clara was motivated by revenge, not justice, her brother's death a personal obsession. A local radio host, cozy with the sheriff's department, amplified the story, calling her a dangerous outsider. But Clara was prepared. She'd contacted her brother's old lawyer, who provided documents proving the shooting was under DOJ investigation at the time. Community leaders rallied to her defense, sharing the truth with neighbors and urging action. The hearing dawned under a slate-gray sky. The courthouse was a fortress, barricades manned by state police, satellite trucks from CNN and MSNBC, and a crowd spilling onto the lawn. Inside, the courtroom was packed to the rafters, families with tear-streaked faces, activists with notebooks, deputies with hardened expressions. Clara sat in the front row, flanked by Marcus, Jaden, and Naomi. Holt sat at the defense table, his face a mask of defiance, but his hands betrayed him, trembling slightly as he gripped the edge. Judge Grayson presided, her silver hair a beacon of authority, her gavel a promise of reckoning. DOJ attorney Michael Lang opened with a damning case: Holt's assault on Clara, captured on video, falsified reports from Marcus's arrest, witness intimidation against Jaden, and a decade-long paper trail of complaints, beatings, wrongful detentions, threats. Jaden's video played on a loop, each frame a nail in Holt's coffin. Marcus took the stand, his voice steady as he recounted the protest. Peaceful until deputies charged, Holt leading with a baton. "I didn't throw anything," he said. "I was just asking for clean water." Lena Torres followed, her uniform crisp, but her hands unsteady. "I've seen Holt falsify reports," she said. "I stayed quiet to keep my job, but not anymore. This has to stop." The room murmured, deputies shifting uncomfortably. The defense, led by Victor Crane, fought back, painting Holt as a victim of a witch hunt. They called Greg Walsh, a former deputy fired for misconduct, who claimed Clara provoked Holt. Lang dismantled Walsh, revealing his current job with a union-funded security firm and a history of perjury. The courtroom buzzed with skepticism. Then Clara took the stand. She spoke calmly, recounting the assault, Holt's threats, his history of abuse. When Crane brought up her brother's death, she didn't flinch. "My brother's case is why I do this work," she said, her voice clear. "Not for revenge, but for justice. For Jamal, for Marcus, for every family silenced by men like Holt." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. On the final day, a surprise witness emerged. Bill Harlan, the retired deputy. His voice trembled as he testified about Holt's early career, how he'd coerced subordinates into falsifying reports, how he'd covered up a beating of a teenage boy that left the kid with a broken arm. "I was complicit," Harlan said, tears in his eyes. "I'm here to make it right." As the hearing closed, Grayson delivered her ruling. "Deputy Caleb Holt, this court finds you guilty of gross misconduct, assault, and obstruction of justice. You are terminated from the Fairhaven Sheriff's Department, effective immediately. This case is referred to the District Attorney for criminal prosecution." The room erupted. Cheers, sobs, reporters scrambling for quotes. Holt was escorted out, his head bowed, his empire in ruins. Grayson wasn't finished. "This court also recommends a federal investigation into the Sheriff's Department and its union affiliates. The people of Fairhaven deserve a system they can trust." The crowd roared its approval. Outside, the lawn became a sea of celebration. Protesters chanted Clara's name, signs waving in the air. She stepped onto the courthouse steps, cameras flashing, and raised a hand for silence. "This isn't my victory," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. It's yours. Justice isn't a gift. It's a fight. And you fought. Keep fighting. For Marcus, for Jaden, for every voice that's been ignored. Because when we stand together, no one can silence the truth. The crowd erupted again, phones recording her every word, her final line, "No one can silence the truth," echoing like a rallying cry. Fairhaven changed after that day. A civilian oversight board was formed, with Lena Torres and Marcus Reed as key members, tasked with rebuilding trust. Lena, inspired by her daughter's future, worked to ensure the department served the community, not ruled it. Marcus turned his activism into policy, advocating for clean water and youth programs. Jaden Carter launched a youth media program, teaching kids to document their truths with cameras and microphones, turning the town's pain into a platform. His first project was a documentary about the hearing, premiered at the community center to a packed house. Pastor Naomi Wells's church became a hub for reform, hosting town halls where residents shared stories and planned initiatives, like a scholarship fund for kids affected by police violence. Bill Harlan volunteered to mentor new deputies, his redemption a quiet testament to change, often seen walking the streets with a smile, greeting kids he'd once failed to protect. Clara stayed a month longer, ensuring the transition held. She met with families, reviewed policies, and trained local activists. One evening, she sat with Marcus and Jaden at the diner, sharing a plate of pancakes under the glow of neon lights. "You did this," Marcus said. "We did this," Clara corrected, "and you'll carry it forward." She left Fairhaven quietly, her satchel lighter, but her spirit full. The story didn't end there, it spread. On YouTube, clips of the video, Clara's speech, and the crowd's chants drew millions of views, while local newspapers reprinted her words. Podcasts dissected the case, classrooms debated its lessons. Fairhaven became a symbol. No one is above the law. Courage can spark change. Truth can't be silenced. Somewhere, in another small town, another Clara was watching, ready to step into the fight. If this story moved you, if it lit a fire in your heart, like, share, and subscribe. Tell us in the comments, what would you do if injustice came to your town? Let's keep this flame alive. Together, we can change the world, one truth at a time.